Good morning and welcome to the 2024 Roanoke Chowan Literary Festival. We are delighted that you're here. My name is Bob Anthony. I don't currently live in the Roanoke Chowan region, but I grew up here in Hobgood over in Halifax County, and it's always great to be back. In 2021, I retired after 40-some years with the North Carolina Collection unit in the Wilson Special Collections Library at Chapel Hill. Over the course of those years, where we were collecting books and pamphlets and broadsides and newspapers, various materials, photographs, I became more and more aware of the rich literary and cultural heritage of this region and began to notice materials that I think many of us have forgotten.
Greetings, party people. So, my name is Kianna Alexander. I am a North Carolina native, but I was born and raised in Durham. I grew up in various neighborhoods around the city, but am mostly familiar with the area very close to North Carolina Central. That was where my grandmother lived my entire childhood, so that's the area that is home to me. For the past, 13, 14 years, I've been in the Fayetteville area. So that's where I call home now. My connection to this area, to Chowan County, and more specifically to Edenton and Elizabeth City, is through a book that I published in 2022 called Carolina Built, about Josephine Leary, who was a real life person who was born in this area and went from enslavement to real estate magnate in the 19th century. A true story that I thought was definitely something that was worthy of being part of the historical lexicon, and for some reason was not, and so I took that up as my job to do. So I started writing really young, probably middle school age. I was probably about 11 or 12 when I started writing plays, short stories, and stuff just in my free time outside of things that I had to do for school. I was always reading. I read really early. I think I read at like 4 or 5 years old, and would read anything I could get my hands on, including cereal boxes and billboards and magazines and the Wall Street Journal, whatever was available for me to read. I was constantly curious and seeking knowledge about a broad range of topics. When I was 16, I found a copy of Beverly Jenkins' very first novel called Night Song. It's a historical romance set in Kansas in the 1800s between a Buffalo soldier and a black schoolmarm. And I was probably just a shade too young, just a shade, because it did have the adult activities in it. But I was so enamored with the way that she told the story, the way that she was able to seamlessly weave historical fact into the love story, and feeling like by the time I had finished it, I had learned all these interesting things about the Great Exodus and all these different events in history that were significant to African Americans that I didn't know before I read the book. And I just thought that this was like a magical thing that she had done to be able to get me to be absorbed with the love story, but also to learn all these things outside of that. And I knew then, when I finished that book, that I wanted to do something like that. I knew how that book made me feel, even though I couldn't really describe it any better than I felt seen, because most of the books I had been encountering up until then were starring white characters. So I had read all of like Sweet Valley, from Twins and Friends all the way through to University, and like the Fear Street and the Goosebumps and the Hardy Boys and the Nancy Drew. All of the stories that I was really familiar with were starring white characters, and this was the first one that I really engaged with deeply that had people in it that looked like me. So I knew that whatever the feeling was that I got from this book, I wanted to create something that would make somebody else feel that way. So that was me at 16. It would be a long time before I actually got around to getting serious about it. I went to college way back when Cash Money took over for the 99 in 2000. Went to St. Augustine's and majored in elementary education, mainly because at 17 I really didn't know what I wanted to. I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't know how to do it as a career. I kept hearing, yeah, you can write stories, but you can't do that for a living. That's not a job. You have to do a job. And it was like, well, what am I supposed to do? Well, you seem to be good with kids. You've been in the Girl Scouts and teaching Sunday school and whatnot. You know, why don't you just go teach? And I'm like, okay, cool. So I majored in elementary education. And I stayed in the program for 3 years, all the way through the end of my junior year. I killed at pedagogy. I kept my GPA high. Educational theory, got it. Put me in a classroom with kindergartners, panic attack. So, oops, not supposed to be here. Supposed to teach, but this is not my age group. So that was kind of a little fork in the road where I might have veered off the path a little bit. But in the interim, I have got married and divorced, had 2 children. My daughter will be actually 14 in a couple of weeks, and my son is 17. So nowadays, I am back in the game. After 21 years away from college, I re-enrolled, actually in January. This is my first semester back at Fayetteville State as a full-time student. I am finishing my bachelor's degree in English, language, and lit, which is what I should have been majoring in way back when. And I'm planning on moving into an MFA program because the goal now is to be a creative writing and women's studies professor. I've been in the industry in the meantime. So I started writing for publication. I started my first manuscript in 2004, and it took me until 2009 to get it out the mud and get it published. So that was when my first book was published. Since 2009, I've had about 15 years in the industry, 20 if you count where I started writing for publication. In that time, I have published 49 books.
Wow.
And that's across multiple genres. I started out in romance. My first book was a thriller with romantic elements. So I've written that, I've written romance, I've written paranormal romance, I've written historical, and I've also written historical fiction. Carolina Built was my first major historical fiction. And I've also written nonfiction, essays. I wrote a piece for the Gumbo about Heavy D. So I've done a broad range of publishing, but most of my work has been in prose and fiction. So I've encountered a lot of things in the industry, and not all of them have been pleasant. But you know, we take it with a grain of salt. As a Black woman in the industry, I have encountered a lot of situations where I was ignored, dismissed, diminished, or downright disrespected, because people came to me with sort of a preconceived notion of who I was, what I was capable of, before ever giving me a chance to show what I could do. And that's been everything from industry professionals to agents to editors, people making assumptions about me. I remember being at a conference in 2018, and at that time, I was pretty deep into my career. I had been published for almost 10 years at that point. And I went to one of those mixers at the conference that a publishing house would throw so that you can come and meet their editors as an author and see what the lay of the land is, what they're publishing, and just kind of chit chat. It's like a little cocktail party type of thing. So I'm standing at a table with 2 other authors that I know, and one of the editors, I knew who she was, but she obviously didn't know me, approached me. And she was like a younger white lady. She's probably in her early 30s. And she walks up to our table, and she's like, she just starts talking. We're all 3 of us in Black authors. She just started talking to us. And she was making all these statements about, oh, well, you know, at this publishing house, we do this, that, and the third for authors. And you know, I think that's especially valuable for ladies like you, especially you who must be just getting started as a debut. And my friend stopped her and was like, whoa, ma'am. Honestly, I don't know what's going on here, but obviously you don't know who Kianna is. And she's already published 15 books, and I'm gonna need you to dial that debut stuff back. So I didn't have to say anything. I was like, hey. But that kind of thing has been a common experience, and it's tapered off as I've gotten deeper into my career. Now that more people in the industry know who I am and know what I do, they're familiar with my work to some degree. So typically, if they have those opinions of me, at least they keep them to themselves. But I've encountered a lot of different things like that. And I'm like, as a person who went through most of my life as a closeted individual and came out as a lesbian at 36 years old, I'm 41 now, that added a whole nother layer of fun a whole nother layer of fun to the discrimination salad, because then there were places that would accept me as a writer, as a woman and a black person, and the types of things that I wrote. And then when I started writing black lesbian fiction, then it was a problem. So like, oh, we'll accept your other things, but not this. This isn't, we don't publish this, or we don't support this, or the lifestyle, whatever. There are places that I go to speak where I can only talk about this book because they don't even like romance at all, even if it's straight. So because I write across multiple genres, that can make it a little bit difficult. But honestly, I was put here with a purpose in mind, and the purpose is impact. Everything that I do is settled into the groove of how is this going to be impactful? How can I make somebody who looks like me, who has felt like me, who has felt left out and pushed aside, how can I make that person feel seen? How can I make them think about the ways they can then create something that can have impact, positive impact in the world? Everything that I've done in my career has been geared towards positive impact. And because that's how I move, I know that in the end I'm going to be successful, because I'm not just in this for money. This is what I do for a living. I have a separate business for private consultation for writers who want to publish, and then I also am, like I said, working towards my degree so that I can teach. I tutor in the Writing Center on the campus of Fayetteville State. So I have all these other things going on, but the writing has always been the main thing. And I've been doing this as like my sole job for the last 12 years. And the rest of it comes from things like this, speaking engagements. But all of it is tied up in my writing. But everything that I do with my writing is all about impact. And it's just important to me, doing something like this where I knew that young people would be here. It was important for me to come, even though it's kind of a schlep from my house. It was important for me to be here because I think that there's something that Beverly Jenkins, who will always be my favorite author and is now a mentor and a friend of mine. I met her at a conference in 2008 when I was first getting started, about a year before my first book came out. There is something that she told us. There are a bunch of writers that all came up around the same time, early 2000s writers who are fans of Beverly. We hang around her when she goes places. We try to be there, show up. The people who come in with a suitcase of all your books and they want you to sign them off, that's us for Beverly. That's how we get down for Beverly and for Brenda Jackson. So we were at an event, and this was several years back, and we said, you know, we really want to know what we can do to thank you, because she's been a really fierce advocate for us inside of the industry, because she's like, I'm getting old, I'm going to retire one day, and I want y'all coming up as the next crop of black novelists to be successful. We asked her what we could do to pay her back for her kindness and her advice and her guidance. She told us to pass it along. She said, pay it forward. She said, kids can't be what they can't see. And ever since she told us that, this is what I've been doing. That's what got me serious about the speaking aspect, because I was like, she's right. Because it was running into her that had such an effect on me. Encountering her as a person and engaging with her work was what got me thinking about how I could do the same thing, but in my own way. I could bring my voice and be impactful in the same way she was to me. So that's mainly why I'm here. And I feel like, was I supposed to read?
If you want to, it's really up to you.
Because I'll just keep talking. I have so much to say.
do what, it's up to you.
Okay.
I mean, the young people.
Yeah, I love doing things like this, especially because I'm like, where is that? That's way up in the, because from Fayetteville, I don't even know, 3.5 hours, 4 hours. I came from my girlfriend's house in Clayton, so it was a lot closer. But I was like, I don't know where I'm supposed to be going here. And then when I was going back and forth of the emails and stuff, and I saw that, you know, this was something that was geared towards young people, I was like, well, I don't know where it is, but that's what GPS is for. I'm going to find it. I'm going to show up for the kids, for the youths, and be impactful. So that's why I'm here. So, I mean, I can keep talking all day, but if y'all have questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you for coming all this way, by the way. Thank you for showing up.
Go ahead.
I am not one of the youths.
You're one of my peers, my esteemed colleagues.
Are your kids also writers? And if they are, what's that like? And if they're not, what is it like you know, being in a writer's home with people who, do your kids get it or do they not? That's kind of my question.
Well, my oldest child, who is 17, is autistic and also has Down syndrome. So he doesn't really conceptualize all of this. He gets that mommy travels a lot for work. My daughter, who is going to be 14 in a couple of weeks, she understands exactly what I do. She hates writing. Like when she has to do papers for school, she's like, Mom, I don't want to. Oh my God. The wailing and the gnashing of teeth. She hates writing. But she's a very talented artist. She does visual art. So she could sketch, she could paint. She makes these beautiful sculptures out of clay. So that talent obviously didn't come from me. That probably came from her dad. But I just love to see her indulging in anything like that is like kind of off the beaten path. It's not academic, but I think that like the arts enrich the experience of life. So I love seeing her do her thing that she's good at. But she understands what I do, and it's kind of like, because she's in middle school, she can't decide whether it's cool or it's cringe. It depends on the day. She's like, oh, Mom, you know, somebody said that, you know, they had read one of your books and they thought it was cool that you're my mom. So that's like one day she's like, yeah, that's cool for me, cool points. And then the next day she's like, God, you have to go to another thing? I wanted to go to Five Below. Who's going to take me to Five Below? So it's kind of a mixed bag. But, you know, you just kind of go with the flow. With teenagers in the house, it's going to be an adventure either way.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
Yeah, you have written in several genres with Josephine Leary.
Yes.
How did you learn of her and use her for historical fiction? And are there other historical characters that you're playing around with, maybe doing some historical fiction on?
Well, oddly enough, I first encountered Mrs. Leary's story on Twitter. So I know about her thanks to Beyonce's internet. And this is one of those things where, like, as a lifelong North Carolinian, I thought I should have known before, but I didn't. The person who is now my agent, Sarah Younger, tweeted about her in 2019. And she happened to be at Edenton visiting a historic site. She saw the picture, the plaque outside of Mrs. Leary's building, and she tweeted about it. She was like, oh my gosh, like I'm a North Carolinian, I didn't know this person, she's done all these remarkable things. Somebody should write a book about this. Who's gonna write me a book about this? And I tweeted back at her, I'll do it. Because for me, this was like history catnip. I love this kind of thing. I'm a history nerd at heart. I love going off on the rabbit hole to like search out obscure facts. So when I saw it, I was like, I could totally do that. I could totally, absolutely do that. We met at a conference a couple months after that tweet, and she became my agent, and we immediately hit the ground running with research on this project. So that was 2019. Now, mind you, the book was released February 22nd of 2022. So it was about an 18-month process for me of research and writing, going to Edenton, going to Elizabeth City, going to Duke, to the archives where her papers are held, to kind of discover everything that I could find about her life so that I could make this as true to life as possible. Even though it's not a biography, it's historical fiction, it's 85% factual information, which you can verify by the handy-dandy bibliography in the back of the book. The other 15% is the stuff that we couldn't find information about, so I had to kind of fill in the gaps based on what I knew about her life. It was, to date, probably, I poured more of myself into that project in terms of time and energy than anything else I've ever written, and I'm really proud of it. I've gotten really positive feedback on it, generally speaking, although I've had some less than stellar encounters with people who had things to say about it that were negative. I love how the internet makes people so bold. And then you have a few who are brazen enough to do it in your face. That's fun. I had a lady up in the mountains I visited last year to talk about Carolina Built specifically. And I'm like, she took time out of her day to leave her home, to drive to this auditorium, to hear me speak, to wait until the end, to raise her hand to say, well, I don't think there was enough violence in it. I mean, black people were getting beat up and killed and stuff, and you didn't write about that. And I just don't think it's right that you left that out. And I'm just like, ma'am, are you aware that you're speaking out loud and we can all hear you? It's not violent enough. I'm like, there are plenty of places you can go for that type of material. That's not what I do here. And I had to explain to her about allegory, how I did portray violence, but I used something else. Because the idea was to portray the violence that Mrs. Leary would have likely suffered without triggering black readers who are already very aware of these things. So I used an allegory. The story has a scene where there is a carriage that comes careening through a Juneteenth celebration at the churchyard, and they are pelted with rotten tomatoes. Well, what does rotten tomato flesh look like? Blood, brain matter, guts. This was very clear to black readers what it actually meant, but that lady just didn't get it, and she wanted to let everybody know she didn't get it. So that was on her. But for the most part, the feedback has been very positive, and it's gotten me into places that I couldn't access with my romance. Like one of the places that I was really keen on being featured in was Essence Magazine. I had been reading Essence Magazine since I was like 7, and a lot of the idea I have about who I am as a black woman comes from Essence. And I had been submitting my romance novels to them forever, like ever since the first book. Send it to Essence, send it to Essence. And they had never really responded to anything. But when this book came out, they called me. They called my agent. And they were like, oh, the editor-in-chief wants to interview Kianna. And I was like, yes. I don't care when, we'll make time. So that was one of those things that was like a goal of mine that I was able to get to because of this book. In terms of other historical figures, I've been working on 3 different projects. One is about Dr. Anna Julia Cooper. They're all North Carolina stories. One is about Hiram Rhodes Revels, who was the first ever African-American senator. We've had 232 years of congressional history, and only 11 black senators, by the way. And the other is about a woman named Maureen Pelham Johnson, who was actually the great niece of Mrs. Leary, who, this is her younger brother's granddaughter. She grew up in D.C., went to Howard University for both her undergraduate and her medical degree, became a tuberculosis lung pathologist, worked for the VA her entire career, and in 1965, in the heat of the civil rights thing, became the first black woman to become the chief of staff at the VA hospital in D.C. So those are like the 3 historical projects that I have in various stages of completion right now.
Not writing specific, but you mentioned that you stopped going to school and then had just recently chosen to go back. What prompted, so for so many people that post-secondary education is not linear.
Oh yeah.
What prompted you to choose to go back when you did?
Well, I was sort of disillusioned with the process when I left at first because it was becoming very clear to me that I was in the wrong major, that I was not going to be able to hack it in like a K through 12 classroom, even though I'm a pedagogist at heart. This wasn't my age category. And I was like, do I start over? What am I going to do? And I ended up leaving because it was just too much at the time for me to figure out. But the reason that I came back is because after all these years in the industry, I find that there are still places that I don't get taken seriously just because of not having my degree. And then also the desire to get into the college classroom. I know that I have to finish that degree and I have to go on to that Master of Fine Arts program if I want to be able to stand behind the podium as a professor. I do this type of thing all the time. I give lectures at colleges. I've been doing that since about 2013. And I've been at Elizabeth City State. I've been at DePaul in Seattle. I've been at Kansas State. I've been at Bowling Green. My manuscripts are in the archives at Bowling Green. They have a popular culture library there that keeps romance manuscripts, and I've submitted a lot of my old dusty manuscripts and things from the early parts of my career into that library. So I've been in the space. I've been doing the things that professors do, including giving assignments, grading assignments, giving feedback in real time. When I was in Elizabeth City in February, I took the kids on a field trip from campus to Edenton and walked them around the city so that they could see Mrs. Leary's properties, explained all the background information to them. So I've been doing the same thing that a professor would do, but I'm not on anybody's payroll because of the degree issue. So that was what prompted me to just go back and finish it. I just don't want to, I want to keep doing what I've been doing without having to chase invoices, basically. Does that make sense? Anybody else?
I'm envious of your
your long career with just writing, and I'm wondering, have you seen your writing change since you started out? Any process changes, routine changes, style changes?
Yeah, because the first book was very much like flying by the seat of the pants, just me sitting at a computer typing. And I was able to do that because of my cousin. Her name was Tanya Davis. And she was a cousin on my dad's side, like a distant, like a second or third cousin. And she was probably about 10 years older than me. But during that year of 2004, while my then husband was in training, I stayed at her house in Richmond to be near the base where he was training because he was having health issues. And the Army was like, hey, you need to be close by in case something happens. And she let me stay in her house. This is the first time she met me, by the way. She'd never met me before. My dad just called her and said, hey, my daughter needs a place to stay, and you're in Richmond. And she was like, cool, cousins. So she let me stay in her house, refused to take rent. She had an office because she worked on base in the hospital. So she had an office in her house with a computer and the printer and all the paper. And I was like, hey, I'm just here chilling at your house. Do you mind if I use your computer? She's like, knock yourself out. So I start writing this book. She comes home, and I give her the first chapter. And she reads it. She's just dangling off the end of her bed, just riveted. And I'm like, I'm just kind of waiting to see what she's going to say. And when she finishes, she goes, where's the rest of it? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't even know if there is a rest of it. I was just playing around. And she was like, oh, no. You're going to finish this. You're going to finish this. And here's what we're going to do. She would take all the good snacks, right? Put them in the deep freezer. Lock the deep freezer and take the key. And she's like, if you want the Oreos and the good stuff, when I come home from work, you're going to have me a chapter. Because if not, you're not getting it. And that was motivation enough for me to finish my first book. And so when it came out, I dedicated it to her. She passed away in 2013, but she lived long enough to see that come to fruition and to see how and I always will give her credit everywhere I go because she was the impetus for my career. Like, she was the person pushing me. The only person who even knew I was writing, and she was invested in it. So that was kind of how that whole thing kicked off. So I can see how, as a beginning writer, it was just like, okay, we're just writing, we're getting it out the mud. But now there's a whole process of research, outlining, and I need something as a framework to kind of keep me on track. The story's going to do what the story's going to do. The characters are definitely not under my control. They're doing their own thing, and I'm just transcribing it. But there's a framework in place now that wasn't there before, and I can see how life experience and perspective has deepened my voice. Because there were times earlier in my career where it was like, can you make it less, it's a little too urban. Can you make it less black? And I would kind of go, I don't know, maybe I could tone it down a little bit. But after about year 5, I'm like, no. If anything, I'm going to make it more black out of spite now. So it's deepened I basically have come to understand what I can do. Like, I know my voice. I know what I'm meant to be writing. I know the kind of stories that I want to tell, the things that I want to have with my name on it when I'm long gone. And that's what I stick to. I'm not writing to satisfy anybody else. I have a little, small, dedicated fan base. And they're pretty much it in terms of, like, people who I'm writing towards. But, like, I know the thing that I'm supposed to write. I never stifle myself. I think that's the biggest thing. Not stifling myself out of fear that I won't be accepted or I won't get published or whatever. Like, my work is going to get to the people it's going to get to that are supposed to see it, even if I do something that somebody else doesn't agree with and think it's too intense. So I think I've just put more of myself into my books as my career has gone along.
What would you tell a past version of yourself, whatever age you want, just like what would you like to tell her?
How much time do we have? Because I'm like, I don't want to use up the entire lunch break.
You're fine.
When I think of myself as a younger person, I think probably the turning point for me was around 10th grade. That year was really traumatic for me. There were a lot of things going on with my family of origin that were less than ideal. And honestly, I don't have a lot of memories of that year. I think my brain has just blocked a lot of it out. And there were so many things happening around me that there really wasn't that space to develop who I was as a person, to spend that time with myself, learning who I was. And I think that's what I would tell myself. I think that's what I would tell myself at about 15 or 16, that I don't have to be rushing towards anything. I don't need to follow this prescribed path, because I was very much doing that as a young person. Like, the prescribed path was, I was raised in a Baptist church environment. The prescribed path was get good grades, go to college, in college find a husband, get married, have babies and a dog and a minivan and a partridge in a pear tree, and that's going to make you happy. And I really thought that that was the thing. And it turns out, for me specifically, it wasn't at all. Had I taken the time in my late teens and early 20s to just sort of be with myself, to have that internal dialogue with myself and figure out who I was, it would have saved me a lot of speed bumps and potholes along the road. So I think that is probably the most important thing. That's what I would tell my younger self. Knowledge of self, knowing yourself first, and leaning into who you are no matter who doesn't like it, because who you are is who you are. There's only one of you. And you can't be anybody else. That spot's already taken. So that's probably the advice I would give to my younger self.
Thank you. I love that.
Understanding this conference or festival is mainly for the younger writers, but what advice would you give to a middle-aged person who has done some writing but has never gone 100% into writing?
Well, this is where I put on like my consultant hat, because I have a lot of clients like that. And as a student at this big age, I get it. But like at Fayetteville State, 50% of the student population are students that are adult learners or over the age of 25. So I encounter a lot of people who are my age or older. I actually tutored somebody last week who is 56, and she's going for her bachelor's degree just like I am. I think the first thing is remembering that there's not a time limit or a schedule as to when you have to accomplish the thing that you're meant to accomplish. The story that's in you is yours. Nobody else can write it. Therefore, whatever path you take, however long it takes for you to tell that story, it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, it's yours and nobody else can do it. Nobody else can write with your voice, bring your perspective, your wisdom to that story but you. So that's like the first thing, like internalize that there's no time limit. The other thing is, no matter where you are in your chronological age, when you're starting out as a writer, you're a baby writer. And that's okay. You got to take those first steps. You got to stumble a few times. You got to go through a little bit of stuff to kind of learn the ropes of the industry. It's always good to have somebody who's done it before to kind of provide that guidance for you, which is why I do talks like this and why I do workshops and consultancy, because there are a lot of like things in the industry that are scammy and like black hat and not above board that I like to kind of warn people away from. But in terms of like, I just don't want you thinking that you're late. You're not. You're not late. This is the time that it starts to really get to you, that feeling of, I really need to publish this. I really need to finish that story. That's the time. That's like your higher self telling you, it's time now. So what happened before, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how old you are when you first start off as a writer, you're a baby writer, but you're not always going to be a baby writer. You're going to get that experience, and you're going to get it by doing. And you can absolutely do it. There is space for you in the industry. Wherever you come from, whatever your background is, whatever your age is, there's space for you in the industry, because there's so many stories. There's so many perspectives to be met. And there's always this gap in the market, because publishing has been dominated by elder white people, for lack of a better term. The people who are like in high up positions, CEOs and stuff, that's who they are. They're old white men. So the perspective of what gets published a lot fits what they want to read. But what about everybody else? What if you're younger? You're still a white man, but you're younger. What if you're gay? What if you're trans? What if you're of a different background? What if you're from Pakistan? You know, there are all these perspectives that need to be met. And that means that you bring something valuable to the table no matter your age. So definitely internalize that. And remember that we all have to travel this path as writers. We all start somewhere, but one day you're going to get where you're trying to go. You just have to keep at it.
All right.
All right, good afternoon. Everyone's back. I have the honor of introducing our next speaker, Dr. Gregg Hecimovich.
Beautiful.
Okay. We've heard other variations, but we
Yes.
wanted you to settle that.
I say it differently every time myself.
All right. So, just briefly, his bio it's in the handout, but he's very well known. But he's a Hutchins Family Fellow at Harvard University, a professor of English at Furman University in South Carolina. I believe you were East Carolina University connection, and that's probably a room of your story. That's how you got connected with this project. Not to steal your thunder, but to make the Eastern North Carolina connection here. The Life and Times of Hannah Crass is a 2023 book selected by the Washington Post as one of the 10 best books of 2023. Life and Times is also a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award in the category of biography. Dr. Hecimovich received his PhD in English from Vanderbilt University as a recipient of fellowships from the National Endowment for the Humanities and National Humanities and elsewhere. As a native of Murfreesboro, I'm fascinated by his research. How a professor who's starting with who wrote this novel, this enslaved person who wrote this, formerly enslaved who wrote this novel, how do we get here, Eastern North Carolina, how do we get here to Murfreesboro? And I have read his book and devoured every line of it, and that was the question I wanted to know. Not just, could it be anybody? Was it her? Was she here? And in this town that I grew up in, and I know half the references, and all the names in the historic houses, how fascinating to put her here, and it's an honor to know that Hannah Crass lived here, and she had her own dreams, and one of those was to teach and write. She wrote, she taught, eventually, and what an honor to honor her at this forum by not only talking about her literature but her life, and no one better to do that than Dr. Hecimovich, who's been researching for, I believe, about 18 years on this. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. And I'm going to leave time for questions. And usually I don't read, but I want to share a little snippet here and there, and take you just a little bit through the biography. It's what Jeff said. What's really important. The first black woman to ever write a novel was an absolutely brilliant, resourceful, comic genius, and she helped develop her life between 1852 and 1856 around this particular university. It was really important to her and to her growth as a human being and as a writer and as a very religious woman. There's a lot in the biography about how deeply religious she was. And whenever I come back on campus here, I was talking with Brandon, who's from Murfreesboro and knows a lot. So anybody who knows this history, I just love engaging, because once you know the deeper history of the place you walk, it's so much richer. You might not even realize that when you take a stroll outside this campus, how extraordinarily important this part of the world is and was. The very first American writer published a novel in Boston and then moved here. The very first black woman novelist helped cultivate her skills here. This is a hotbed of American history and American literature. So I take you a little bit into the book, a couple snippets, and then we'll get in some question and answer. So here's how the biography begins. And at some point I'll tell you about myself, but if you read the biography, I don't talk a lot about myself, because quite frankly, I'm not that interesting. She really is, and so I'm going to start with her instead of myself. On a sweltering day in August 1857, a light-skinned woman arrived in the small town of McGrawville, New York. She had traced a route along the Tiafanuga Valley where few slave catchers operated. Her hair was cropped short and she wore men's clothing. a dark jacket, a vest, and trousers. A broad-brimmed hat lined with dust and sweat partially sheltered her face. She called at 19 West Academy Street, the farmhouse on the grounds of New York Central College, where a caretaker took her travel case, a gentleman's valise, and ushered her out of the heat. At the back of the house, he opened a door to expose a hole in the wall. Five narrow steps led down to a cool, dim tunnel. The root cellar, constructed with dry masonry and lined with heavy stones, stretched some 50 yards before opening onto Smith Creek. Crouched in semi-darkness, smelling the baked earth above, the woman ate radishes and waited for her next move. 2 days later, concealed in Horace Craft's attic, she removed a manuscript from her valise. Her sweat mixed with ink as she returned her attention to her work. With the dash of her pen, she struck out the name she had been disguising as WH-R. 3/4 of the way through the book while she was writing her novel, she was disguising a certain name. Now that she's in Horace Craft's attic, safe in New York, having escaped slavery, she's going to do something with this manuscript that she stole out of slavery. She dipped her pen, drew up fresh ink, and took a risk. Beside the marked out passage, she wrote Wheeler. The ink still fresh on her quill, she backtracked through the manuscript, and every place where she had written WH-R, she returned and identified her enslavers. Their names are Wheeler, she wrote, darkening the missing letters over the dash so there would be no mistake. Mrs. Wheeler informs. Mrs. Wheeler came. She's going back through the manuscript and naming the Wheelers. Mrs. Wheeler informs. Mrs. Wheeler came. Mrs. Wheeler complained. Mrs. Wheeler sent for. She refreshed her ink, touched her pen to her wipe, and continued revising the pages of her work. For an enslaved person, the fact that she could read and write was somewhat extraordinary. That she had escaped with a manuscript in her suitcase is sort of astonishing. Hidden at Horace Craft's farmhouse using material smuggled to her from New York Central College, she continued work on a narrative she would complete months later in New Jersey. Only after she finished the work did she include a title page, The Bondwoman's Narrative by Hannah Crafts, a fugitive slave recently escaped from North Carolina. This is the closest she came to identifying herself. Like the first male novelist of African descent writing in the United States, William Wells Brown, she adopted the name of the Quaker family who had sheltered her. She called herself Crafts. For nearly 150 years, this manuscript remained lost to history. Someone, probably the author, affixed hard covers to it with glue and cardboard and then stitched a homemade binding. If the pages were read by anyone beyond its author and the work's first collectors, no record exists of it. All that's known for certain is the work came into the possession of Emily Driscoll, a book dealer in New York. This book that I'm just describing, that was stolen out of slavery, written by this enslaved woman who lived in your community, was completed in 1858 after she had completed her escape to an all-black community in New Jersey. What did she do as soon as she escaped slavery? She immediately began teaching in an all-black school near Burlington, New Jersey. She began sharing the gift of literacy, what she had struggled for, what she had reached, and she was passing it on to the next generation. And I didn't discover this until I completed the research on her life, but she lived this extraordinary life. She married, and she was deeply invested with the religion that had preserved her through the challenges of slavery. She was an important church leader in the AME Church in Burlington, New Jersey, where she lived a very happy life. For the next generation of students, there's almost certainly more that she wrote that we just haven't found yet. And some of this has to do with racist history and other stuff that is repletely behind her biography. But what I'm going to do today is not spend time, I'm not going to give you scenes of whippings and torture of black people, because that is not what she wrote about. She did not write, I'm a victim. She wrote, I am a pioneer and somebody who has demonstrated how to build a beautiful, joyous, and even comic life out of the biggest struggles. And so when I take you through just a couple more passages and we'll do question and answer, I just want you to preserve that. For me, as anybody who would engage her novel or her life, she is a beacon for how to engage a world that can include completely cruel suffering, that is controlled by greed, by power, by mean people. But they don't win. They never win. They think they win. She knows that they thought they won, but she escapes. And that family that had possessed her, one of the families that had possessed her, she names when she's calling out the Wheelers. And I'll just share one other piece before I read a couple other things. There's this great scene in the novel when Hannah Crafts is describing this as she was born as Hannah Bond over in Bertie County. When she came into the Wheeler family and ended up in this community, she wanted to write about Mrs. Wheeler. This is John Hill Wheeler House. That's just the John Wheeler House that's just over here, a block or two away. That was where she served the Wheeler family. And she tells the story of Mrs. Wheeler, who was famously jealous and hard to deal with. She was somebody who was from an important family and was used to being coddled and was irritable, but an interesting person. Well, she writes a scene in the book of Mrs. Wheeler suffering constipation and all the things that she has to bring Mrs. Wheeler for her to deal with her constipation. This is a genius comedic writer who is foreshadowing the work that we're going to get and finally accept, with Toni Morrison or Jesmyn Ward. But she's really the base of this great history that we have that's African American literature. So, for those of you who are writers, so we talk, Kianna, who spoke earlier, does all sorts of genres, right? And she writes historical fiction, too. An historical fictional writer is going to do similar things to what a biographer does. But what a biographer cannot do is what Kianna was telling us. I think she said 15% is what she imagines and creates. And a lot of people absolutely love historical fiction because it can have that liberty. As a biographer, you can't do that, but you have to be creative. And I find it to be for me, it's the right genre. So I'm going to share a little passage here, and I want to just remove the screen about what goes into writing this sort of passage, because if you're writing a book for a general audience, you don't want to write a literary argument. Most of the work that scholars do, nobody in this room would willingly read, because it's very academic, it's very professionalized and specialized. Doesn't mean it's not extraordinarily important, it's pushing the boundaries in all sorts of ways, but it's not for a general audience. If you're writing for a general audience, you want to bring in some of the narrative devices that Kianna and our other writers do, who are fiction writers, who are writers of historical fiction, who are reaching broad audiences. So I'm going to tell this part of the story. The Wheeler family, it wasn't well known and not talked about, but when I was doing this research, family members had directed me to both Wheeler brothers would take their almanacs and they would keep records in their almanacs, kind of like a mini diary. So I didn't know this until I was in the years that I was doing this research down at Margaret Worthington's house in Wilmington, North Carolina. And this research all depends on descendant communities, right? It's not just academic stuff that helped me find this story. It's Ben Speller and lots of other people in this room that helped me uncover the story. Well, what Margaret told me was the Wheelers would write notes and mini diaries in their almanac books. Now, you and I don't have an almanac book probably anymore, but we have something like it with our apps, right? An almanac book was going to tell you what the weather was likely to be, and it would give you sort of odd information that could be helpful for crops and so forth. Well, it had a calendar in it, and she told me the Wheelers keep records there. As soon as she told me that, I went back to the Library of Congress where John Hill Wheeler, who she escaped from, the woman who wrote this novel escaped from, he had an almanac book in the miscellaneous collection at the Library of Congress, which nobody's looking at because it doesn't seem like it's going to be important or have important information. In there, he's describing how he and Samuel Jordan Wheeler helped put down Nat Turner's rebellion. If you don't know who Nat Turner is this very famous rebel who helped challenge slavery, not with a pen, but with a sword, and with religious righteousness. And the white story that we've always heard was first written by the Wheelers here in North Carolina, who went to put down the rebellion. And what they said was Nat Turner was a violent, mean, cruel person who wanted to harm white people, and black people and white people joined together to preserve the community from this homicidal, murderous man. That's not who Nat Turner was. So I write about Nat in this, and I'm going to just peel back. I'm going to just read a little bit about this. When Nat and his... Nat Turner's very religious. He's gained his religion. He's gained literacy in similar ways to the writer of the Baumann's narrative. He's taken a specific type of plant that he's creating ink out of and creating his own paper to help plan his revolt. And when he goes to do the revolt, they don't go in shooting guns. They quietly enter their masters' houses. And the people they go after are the slave owners in their community. And this is the part I'll just read, just a paragraph. The assailants chose their weapons carefully, especially for the early attacks, favoring Will Francis's strong arm and broad axe, which could dispatch lives quickly and quietly. The same arm and axe, strengthened and sharpened by clearing trees from the fields of the Travis family members, these were the tools brought to bear against the institution and people that owned them. Quote, the murder of the family, 5 in number, was the work of a moment, not one of them awoke, end quote. Turner later opined. Thomas Gray noted the physical evidence at the home the day after the murders. A little infant with its head cut off, he observed, was forced to exchange its cradle for a fireplace. That child was Putnam Moore, Nat Turner's legal owner. This gruesome theater heralded a truth. Slaveholding was a capital crime that corrupted the blood of generations. There could be no plea of innocence. Here's the last paragraph I want to read from this part of the book. Shadows danced across corpses. I want you to catch this, because this is what a historical fiction writer writes, but you can't fake it. You can't make this up. But it has to read like fiction, because the reader doesn't care. They want a good story. So, shadows danced across corpses. In the bedroom, they flitted over the feather bed with its dead contents, past the bed curtains, the carpet, and the rocking chair. At the dressing table and looking glass, the shadows paused and gathered as a pair of men searched for valuables. In the parlor dining room, the shadows moved again, beyond the chairs and a dining table to the privacy screen at the far end of the room. Behind the screen, the rebels ransacked the apprentice's wardrobe before exiting with money, clothes, and the victim's boots. The swiftness of the attacks is suggested by the value of the unbroken china and dinnerware. 6 dessert plates, 10 dining plates, a set of china, a salt cellar, 2 glass pitchers, 5 glass cans, a sugar dish, and cup plates went undamaged. The family hymn book and Bible, a small parcel of books, a set of silver teaspoons, a second looking glass, picture frames, and even a bottle of castor oil, an umbrella, and a snuff bottle all outlasted the household's human occupants. Okay, I wanted to point that out because I worked on that particular passage for like 5 years or something. Which my wife is like, you got to write the rest of the book. In fact, I wrote like this whole other story of Nat Turner. And my book, after the book I'm writing right now, is going to be a Nat Turner book because I just did so much work on it. But what I wanted to share with this is a writing thing for those of you who are interested in writing accessible history. I didn't make that up. And I didn't bore the reader by saying, look how clever I am, here's how I know all this, but I'm about to do that to you. But I wrote it in a way that the reader won't know unless they're a nerd or a historian. And historians, they're always suspicious if you weren't trained as a historian. Like only if you didn't get your degree as a historian, no, but you can't do history, which is bunk, right? But if you look at the footnote, what I'm going to take you through is what I learned when I was doing this research. And I learned from people like Dr. Speller. I learned from people like Gregory Tyler. I learned from people who didn't necessarily... Dr. Speller has fancy degrees, but not in this specific field. People who do the work of restoring historic homes know this. You go to the probate records. When there was a death and people had property and they were contested and they had to know where the property would go, that there would be a record. And so somebody would go in to list an inventory that we still have for tons of families, including the Wheelers. and they would make an inventory. And when they made that inventory, as Gregory Tyler explained to me, I didn't know until she told me, it makes a lot of sense. They would go room by room and scribble out everything that was in the rooms. So when I wrote that, and in the footnotes, I'm not making that up. There was a mirror in this room. There was a privacy screen just as I'm describing it. There were these particular objects that I'm telling you about. This is deep historical research, but you can write really powerful history by doing that sort of research. You don't have to make it up. And I'm a biographer, not a historical novelist. A historical novelist is doing the same thing. They're just going to push it a little bit further. You have to rein it in a little bit more when you're a biographer. Okay, I'm almost finished reading passages, but I wanted to get to Wheeler House. There's beautiful parts in this book about this particular community, and I shared when I was here before, just these, even though there's lots of horrible things going on, as there always are in human affairs, there's descriptions of the young Chowan Female Baptist Institute students being baptized just out here, and it describes beautifully this your luscious, beautiful natural world here. I'm going to read you something related to the Wheelers because I wanted to cover this before we open it up to questions. Only an accident, this is about property. There's a chapter called Property. Only an accident of history saved the property records that helped sketch the author's life. In 1862, Union forces, Brandon was just telling me this, so I was like, yeah, I know this, Brandon, this is cool. In 1862, Union forces burned down the Hertford County Courthouse in Winton, North Carolina, where the Hertford County record of account ledger and other legal papers were stored. This was the second devastating fire. A fire in 1830 had destroyed most colonial and early 19th century records for the county, but one volume survived both fires. The volume containing the Wheeler family property inventories. Hours before the 1862 fire, a clerk carried the volume home along with others as a precaution after 2 Union warboats were repelled by local troops on the Chowan River. The next day, Chowan, sorry, I get chastised every time I'm in this community. I get it wrong. It's so embarrassing. It's just like pulls the rug out. I'm up here pontificating. I'm a great historian. I got the name of the town wrong. So anyway, the next day, Union forces attacked the town from the river, and much of Winton was burned. The clerk and records escaped. Thanks to the clerk's foresight, we're able not only to reconstruct the physical details of Wheeler House and Liberty Hall near Murfreesboro, North Carolina, but also to gain valuable insight into what it must have been like to be enslaved within the Wheeler Circle. Now, what happened in this community, a really important, great historian, Thomas C. Paramore, worked with local boosters here in Murfreesboro in the 1980s. And these were properties that were falling apart, like Wheeler House and other properties that are part of your historic district here. And Paramore did Herculean great research, helping uncover what these look like. But the part of the story they completely left out was black people. Completely left out. So if you go to Wheeler House today, that's still part of the story. The black story is still left out. And that's not a coincidence. So let me share another part. Wheeler House in Murfreesboro still stands, restored after careful reconstruction of inventories I've just noted. The consistency of the Wheeler household is attested in family records. I won't read that. The restored property, now called John Wheeler House, is protected, registered with the National Park Service, and maintained by the Murfreesboro Historical Association. The inventories that survived the 1862 Winton fire guided the restoration during its initial restitution in the 1980s. If you visit the property today, however, what you will not hear about is the lives of the enslaved. Nor will you learn anything about Hannah Crafts or other Wheeler captives. The same care that scholars and local boosters put into lovingly refurnishing and restoring the physical property of John Wheeler House was not extended to recovering the lives of the enslaved people who enriched the Wheelers. One of the aims of this biography is to change that. And I have to tell you, I'm still grateful because that's being changed. I've worked in the archives there, and really nice people. And it's James Moore, who oversees the Murfreesboro's Historical Association. I ran into his papers, and he was passed on a story by the Wheelers that they had manumitted their slaves. And that's been repeated and repeated, and it was given the imprimatur of a very important Eastern North Carolina historian. And so that's what you get when you go to Wheeler House, right? But that wasn't true. Hannah Crafts knew it wasn't true. And when she's naming the Wheelers, she's helping us recover a history that's been lost to us. In some ways purposely, in some ways just the passage of time, and we accept what we were taught, right? I always think, like, how could a certain, and this is from a white perspective, how are so many white people so damn racist? Like, it makes no sense. I mean, it's not a good look, right? It really isn't. And then if you actually dig into history, and there's this great scholar who's done this, he's looked at every single textbook taught in America since right before its founding. And what happened is it's been a lie all along. The other half that hasn't been told is finally being told now. And that's a real political problem for certain types of people. And book bannings and lots of other terrible things going on. But actually, it doesn't matter. I'm a white guy and I'm telling you this. I mean, you can only imagine how much more there is to know about our history. So I'll close with this and we'll go to questions. And I may say a thing, return to Hannah Crafts again before we go to questions. But when I was doing this research, I just knew the Wheelers probably didn't release their slaves as you're taught in schools. What happened was John Hill Wheeler wrote the first history of North Carolina. It was like a bestseller in his day. What did he write about? He did not write about Native Americans. What did he not write about? He did not write about Native Americans who owned all of this land. He did not write about Black Americans who created the wealth that helped everyone else that he did write about, which were important political white people, including church history too, which his brother wrote, and Samuel Jordan Wheeler wrote the history of the Baptist church in this area. In the Appendix B, he names some black people, Appendix B, and their names are only associated with their owners. There are 56% of the church at that time. He is burying real history. And it's our responsibility to open it up. Why? Not to make people feel guilty, because it's the better history. It's the more courageous history. It's the more real history. It's the history that would inspire us to be a better people collectively. So don't bury it. So I knew that wasn't the case with the Wheelers, and it took a long time. And you can't take shortcuts, right? This work took a long, long time, and it was working, collaborating with really smart people in the community who know a lot. And then if you are a scholar, you have the time to put pieces together, right? So you can actually use the community knowledge and do something interesting that can be comprehensive. So when I was doing this work, I didn't think the Wheelers probably manumitted their slaves. You can't just Google this or try Ancestry because records are misidentified, they're misindexed. You can get a lot, but you're not going to get everything. And so I discovered in Fort Worth, Texas, a specific slave manifest, a ship that was shipped out of Norfolk, that John Hill Wheeler and his family had sold 28 captives in 1836. That was around half of the extended family's holdings. I want to name them here because these same captives are the ones, and the Wheeler captives are who they mortgaged to build this school. These same captives are who they mortgaged to build Wake Forest University. These captives are the source of the community, and they were forgotten and lost and not told about. Here they are. They are in this manifest. Their names, sex, ages, size, and color are listed in the manifest. There's a reason they did this. You can no longer bring slaves from Africa in the United States until, I think the law comes in around 1806. But they didn't close down slavery. It just happened to be the case of the United States against most of world slavery. You had a very productive slave population who were creating more enslaved people, so they didn't necessarily need captives being brought from Africa. So they allowed Americans to ship slaves around from within the colonies as they gathered more property and built other plantations usually taken through genocide and displacement of Native Americans, and they were built. They had to keep track of that in the record, so that's why this record exists. In that record, you're going to find Jacob, age 25, Dick, 27, mentioned in John Wheeler Sr.'s 1832 property records. They were among the 28 sold. Spared from sale were Molly Morgan, Isaac, Sam, Chunk, Britt, Bill, and Louisa. One of the things I did in this work was to find the specific people the Wheelers held. Most of it was not recorded by them. They didn't want to know. Kept as property, the first thing you do is you break down the family, you take the people away from each other, you break their power. You steal their literacy, you steal their power, you destroy their families. But it didn't work. Hannah Crafts builds a family, and that's part of her story. But here are these 28 folks. And in this diary, this almanac, Wheeler at one point in 1832 wrote the name of the captives that he kept in his household. He called them servants. They become characters who are important in Hannah Craft's life and in the story. So here are the other ones, and I want to name them, and then I'll say a few words about Hannah and we'll open up to questions. Those who were chained and forced to walk to Norfolk to board the ship to New Orleans, these were all 28 people who were sold. Every enslaved person knew if you go to New Orleans, it's a death sentence. You're being brought into the horrific plantation culture of these sugarcane and cotton giant plantations of the South. And you would never, most males wouldn't live 8 years, most females wouldn't live 6 after they were deported, after they were forced into this second Middle Passage. Here they are. Reuben, age 21, from Murfreesboro. Spence, 29. Dave, 37. Kelly, 37. Jim, 27. Henry, 50. Justin, 16. Charles, 16. Jacob, Dennis, 27. Dick, Hercules, both 30. John, 17. Moses, 4. George, 9. And Hannibal, 17. All from your community, all a source of wealth, all who helped create this school and extend what the Wheelers were able to do in building their own wealth. And then there were the enslaved women, girls and children. Amanda, 14, Edie, 11, Hester, 24, Rachel, 20, and child, 3 months. Celia, 40, Affie, 25, Philbus, 28, Phyllis, 35, Tanner, 10 months old, Nancy, 10, and Ever, 5. Like many other Virginia and North Carolina planters, the Wheelers were ready to liquidate. Why? Their captives had become extraordinarily valuable because of the explosion of cotton cultivation in the Deep South, made possible by genocide and displacement of the Native Americans. The labor the Wheeler captives could contribute to the expanding plantations near Louisiana encouraged their sale. Suddenly, Wheeler captives became appreciated assets, and separation at whatever cost to the people themselves proved extraordinarily profitable. And now, one of the things I do in the biography is you're going to get a voice. It's not me trying to imagine what it's like to be a slave in 1856. That would be completely dishonest. I'm a white guy who went to a fraternity at UNC Chapel Hill. I have no reason to tell you anything about slavery. But I can do the deep research and let the documents tell that story. And here's the story from another enslaved woman who lost her father in North Carolina. She writes, "The shadow eclipsed the sunshine, and love brought despair. The parting was eternal. We who are crushed to the earth with heavy chains, who travel a weary, rugged, thorny road, groping through midnights and darkness on earth, earn our right to enjoy the sunshine in the great hereafter." Less than a month after the Hunter, that was the name of the slave ship, landed in New Orleans, and these 28 Wheeler captives were lost to the city slave markets, Samuel Jordan Wheeler married Lucinda Pugh Bond at a ceremony at Willow Hall in Bertie County, where the young Hannah Crafts, who wrote the novel, was almost certainly in attendance. In April 1836, Samuel and Lucinda settled into Wheeler House, returning with some of their former captives and some that were given through marriage to Lucinda Pugh Bond. 6 months later, John Hill Wheeler moves to Washington, D.C. to begin his prestigious political career. That's the history, right? I told you I was going to give you like the lashings and all the terrible stuff, and I just did. The beauty of this biography, the beauty of Hannah Craft's life story is that's not the story. That's the grounds of the story. The story is this brilliant comedic artist who is going to take up the pen, not the sword like Nat Turner, but with no less fierceness, no less religious allegiance, no less power. And she's going to write a novel that was handed down to us. White people couldn't destroy that history. And it couldn't be destroyed even till to this day. And what's going to happen at Wheeler House, what's going to happen in America, those forces that are trying to ignore the past or see it as somehow a guilt trip are wrong. They don't even understand the best parts of our country. What's going to regenerate our country is to follow the courage and brilliance of that and creativity of those earlier generations. This woman, Hannah Bond, who was the product of rape, who lost a child due to rape when she was very, very young, she stole paper from the Wheeler family and began to tell her autobiographical novel. And that autobiographical novel wasn't because she thought, I'm going to have to tell a story that's going to please abolitionists. There was no abolitionist society that was sponsoring her, who were telling her, you can't elaborate on your story and use stories of other enslaved people to write fiction. She didn't feel the need that she had to write a testimonial that some abolitionist would sign off on. She was telling this deep, deep story of what it meant from her life experience. This biography uncovers that and it celebrates it. And for me, it points a way to a really, really bright future for America and Americans. So we'll open up to questions with that. Thank you. I'm going to want to take down the Wheelers for a while. I kind of like, today I was trying to think, what am I going to do different here? And I thought, I'm going to go after the Wheelers since I'm in Murfreesboro. Questions?
And I thank you. I thank you for your honesty. I thank you for saying all of this stuff that you've just said that needs to be said time and time again and just shouted everywhere. I thank you as one who grew up, I was born in 1955, so the history that I learned was the nice little history. And then at some point in recent years, I learned about the Wilmington Massacre. And it was like, what? I didn't know this. Why didn't I know this? Why didn't I know this? So then I started finding historians, the historians who would tell us the truth about America, the truth about everything that's been done here. And I fell in love with you on page 95.
Sweet.
I fell in love with kind of crap a long time ago at page 95 when you read. I fell in love with you that day. I said, I've got to meet this man and tell him, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
And what I want you to know, and thank you so much, but what I'm doing is following black scholars who taught me how to do this, right? So I like I told you earlier, and I'm just not going to fake it, like I'm not going to pretend that I'm a white guy. And I've worked with black scholars who are like, you should not be doing this because you're a white dude. How can you tell black history? I get that problem, right? I understand it. I'm down with it. I'm not going to hide from it. I learned what I do from these amazing black historians who have blazed the trail for understanding how you go into communities. Major black historians like Ben Speller, who are kind enough to share their history with me. And Ben and other people in black or white communities wouldn't have done it if I was a jerk, right? Or if I was trying to extract something from those communities. But what I was saying there is this change, again, doesn't come from a white guy. Like I'm really glad that my book is a part of this work, but it's not me that did it, right? This is black history's done this. And the black historians, Amani Perry, Taya Miles, Thavolia Glimpf, Brenda Stevenson. I've worked with all these people, and I had to win them over because they have to believe that you're actually doing the work that they know is their racial work, right, as black women, to contribute with them. But I think it's extraordinary for where we are as a country. And I think this whole book burning thing, banning or whatever they call it, is it's a sign of strength for our history and for our country. So I just want to say I'm really happy to that. But I'm following these people who've been generous with their time and helped me learn how to do this kind of research. Other questions?
How soon before the Nat Turner book is out?
That's going to be a while, because I took 20 years to write this book, and I've worked 9 books on the book that's next, which is very interesting. Then will come Nat Turner. So by that time, my time's up. I've looked in the mirror. I've experienced middle age.
We'll let you come in with your walker to tell us.
No, I told them I've got 16 and 14-year-old. You may see me on Nat Turner, but I'm going to be in the wheelchair. I hope this is better equipped for that. Oh, and then this. Yeah.
There's a marker when you're coming down Highway 35 from Virginia into North Carolina, going into Conway, town that's west of Murfreesboro, that shares some information about Nat Turner. I don't know if anybody's ever shown you that or.
This Blackhead Post. I write about that. So Murfreesboro militia were there, and we have inside information about what the white people who were a prominent part of this community were doing in response to Nat Turner, and it affected the writer. It still affects your community, right? That happened 1831. That's still affecting your community, and that road was called Blackhead Post until 2020. It was still called Blackhead Post, which was basically doing the work of those white terrorists who stuck the black people they killed their heads on posts. That name is still there, was there until recently. We got work to do, people. There's a problem. There's a problem. Yeah, I think you had a question, sir.
Yeah, I think you spoke a little bit about the political situation of you as a white person, even speaking on this matter. But I think it's important that you, as a white person, any other white person who has this type of literature, has this information, has this history, coming from a genuine place, speaks this history, because we call it Black history, but it's history.
Right. Yeah.
So I think it's not just good for me as a black man, because I'm understanding George Washington also has a slave lady, Miss Armley, that escaped. I didn't even know that he had.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is this: from you making this type of presentation, it'll be from kids who are younger.
Yeah.
To now look at things, because the critical race thing, that argument is debunked. But what it does, it lets them know that, okay, this is a person who I can relate with, who's telling a story, and the way you say it, the way you present it, doesn't make a person feel bad.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And I want to share this. So I worked very closely for years on this project with Henry Louis Gates Jr., who is my hero as a human being. He's a celebrity, right? Finding your roots. He's very powerful, but he is the most generous egalitarian. I mean, he welcomes anybody. In the academic professional world that I move in, I've never been an important person, which I'm fine with. Well, because I didn't have an Ivy League degree didn't mean he wasn't going to work with me. And this is where I'm getting to this question. When the New York Times, when this book came out and the New York Times covered it very graciously and positively, Dr. Gates wrote me, "Isn't this great? White scholar authenticates black history." And I took it like some of you. I thought I wrote him back and like, and he likes to be called Skip. In public, I always call him Dr. Gates. I said, "Dr. Gates, I know that looks bad, but you understand how I do try to situate my whiteness." He's like, "Greg, you don't understand," and it's exactly what you're saying. I started in this field when people would not read black literature. He spent his life, he thought the very best thing in the world is that this nobody trained as a British literature scholar actually can do this work, that it does open it up, because it is everybody's history. That's not, because then you have envy and professionalism, and I I learned a lot writing this work, and I ran a National Humanities Center, National Endowment for the Humanities Institute for young black scholars, along with black colleagues, right? But I ran this institute about how to do this sort of research in communities. Like, what did I learn? And I had some young black scholars who are like, they just never got around the idea that I couldn't be doing the work. And I just thought, they're just young, right? They think so anyway, those things are all there. But I think, like you do, it's everybody's history, which that idea that you need to ban it or burn it or think that it's somehow political or critical race theory, like make a boogeyman. Critical race theory is the evil thing, right? I have a friend who works with the North Carolina legislature. He works at a school. And when the legislators are going to try to attack what they've been told by certain news outlets is the boogeyman, and I said to my friend, just ask them what they mean by critical race theory. And as soon as they explain it, they're just off the... they're talking about something absolutely bizarre nobody would support. And I said, when they ask you, then just say, what do you mean? And when they tell you what they mean, you say, we don't do that here. Because they don't. No school's doing whatever they're saying they're doing, right? So I don't want to get too political, but I thank you for your insight. And Dr. Gates helped me see that. It's the same insight. Question in the back.
I have a question as well, a statement. So, you mentioned about, as a white man, you shouldn't know about black history. In my opinion, that's not really right. As a country, as a supposed to be united as one.
I agree.
Black culture is something that should be shared around the world. So I have a great understanding of who we are as people and where we came from and our roots. And that's just really how I feel about today's time. Something getting crazy nowadays where cultures divide, want to be together.
Yeah. I agree. I think that's very eloquent. I agree. And in practice, I was devoting my career to writing about British literature. My specialty earlier on in my career was parlor games in 19th century British literature. I could have cornered the market on parlor games. But no, much more important to me as a human being existing, I was doing so much of this work. I live in eastern North Carolina. I would see street signs, and the names of everything that was existing in my world had these deep roots. And as I do now that I have this deeper historical consciousness. And like when I walk outside in this community, it's just so rich to me because I know the history. And that, for me as a teacher, I'm fully embracing what you're saying when I'm teaching this white, black, Native American history is history. And that's what the more you understand, the richer, I think as a teacher, the richer your life is as a human being. So it's a great point.
So any words of advice to our young people, all the young people? I want to say thanks to the young people for coming. Thank you for coming. And we've asked all of our authors, our guest authors, so what's your advice to all the beautiful young people out there?
I just think you're going to hear, this is how it always is, like I feel this too, like the generation that's passing on, I think they're sad that their time's over, so they make it nostalgic, like somehow the young people don't have it right. Like they're on their phones all the time, or, oh boy, it's got to be tough to be young. I have a 16 and 14-year-old. You all are awesome. I think there's a base that, there's a knowledge that your lives are building off of, which are going to help you live even more fully. And so much of what I see in this generation is not the story that we got. Kianna was sharing this for herself. Like I was told this, you need to go to college, don't major in something that's artistic or intellectual, major in something that's going to make money, get married, and acquire a lot of property, and punch the clock at the church and you're all good. I don't think this new generation subscribes to that. And I think that's to their credit. I just think there's, my 16-year-old's trans, my 14-year-old's non-binary, and when I was a scholar early on in my career, I was reading Judith Butler. And this is why I was talking about scholarship. None of you want to read Judith Butler, by the way. It's like the deepest theory. It's so hard to read. But she is pushing the boundaries of what we think as gender. And I never even knew, this important scholar that I was reading when I was 20 changed the world, along with other important scholars, changed the world for my children. So my trans child, my non-binary child, they have shackles taken off of them that were constructed shackles like the way we've constructed different things around race. So my only word to young people is, rock on, man. You guys have an awesome future with a really cool life ahead of yourselves. And experiment. And everything I see that you all are doing in this community, your performances, the fact that you're here listening to, a whole afternoon of old people talking about their books is really, really promising. So I just think rock on. And you'll be teaching us what we missed. And, listen, sometimes your elders will have very good advice, even though they've gotten things wrong, so follow that advice too.
All right, thank you, Doctor.
My pleasure.
Writing takes courage. Somehow when you reach down, you pull that inner feeling out, and are you going to say it or not? Writing takes heart. You're pulling from your emotions, your feelings, your mind, your soul, spirit. You're pulling from somewhere. Writing takes effort. There's inspiration and there's perspiration as it goes. And all of you know that. To look for that right word, yes, you have an idea, but you have to dig and find the right words. You have to edit. You have to do it over. And you've heard the writers here today talk about 10 copies, 10 times fixing it. It's work. I just want to welcome everyone to this first Roanoke Chowan Literacy Festival, and the first time we've done this, had student poets and short fiction writers. This is what the focus was on this year. It's my privilege to introduce those of you here to listen to the students. I want to introduce you to some courageous, talented, and dedicated student writers. I know that because I helped read some of the writings. I was part of the group that judged, if you will, the writings, selected them. The judges kind of like, you made the cut, you didn't. But selected the writings, and we've chosen 3 spotlights, meaning what we felt were the 3 readers of poetry and 3 readers of short fiction to emphasize their work. There were a lot of alternatives. Alternates, and we have some readers here today that are not spotlights, but their work was worth reading. And there are others who didn't make the cut, and I would like to say this kind of like March Madness, yeah, you made the brackets and you moved on, but it might be 1 shot difference, So congratulations, you deserve it, but there's some good writers behind you who are not here or will not be reading today, and that says a lot. There was a lot of creativity, originality, a lot of deep themes. The writers have thought deeply, felt deeply, and dug down and found a way to put that to words. Friendship, love, life, death, caring for the planet, immortality, spiritual dimensions. I mean, there was just nothing that was off limits. And that shows that we have a new generation thinking deeply, reflecting deeply, and now expressing deeply. So some of the short fiction stories were fascinating to read. They had unexpected plots and twists. Some that we're not reading here today, but were amazing to read, were a lot of people died, I would say, on the way to visit a cabin in the woods somewhere. If you ever get invited to a cabin or an old house in the woods, don't go. Just don't. Nothing good's going to happen, and no one's coming back, all right? Poetry offers a different challenge. The poet has to say a lot in a few words. So that you have to have a rhythm And that's not necessarily a rhyme at the end, but it's a rhythm. And you have fewer words. It's like, I guess you're writing 140 40 characters or something. So you pack more meaning there. To the students, the ones of you I've talked to, I've said this, let me say it again. Take a deep breath, relax, have fun. This is your moment. Not only that, you've been selected because you have something to say. And also, look who's here. I mean, we're here because we love the written word, the read word. We love literature. We're your home team, okay? And this is your moment. Seriously, take a deep breath, take your time, and read to us. And we want to enjoy that and soak it in. To the audience, I don't need to tell you, we're all appreciative and we're here to listen. I would do one little tweak of a thing different. When I announce someone's name, I'll introduce each person. Let's not applause in the beginning. Let's all sit back as listeners of a work we're getting ready to appreciate and just listen. Give that moment of silence or respect or anticipation, if you will. Let the student read the story, and then, of course, that's the time to applause. That's the only little thing we would do differently.
And speak loudly because there's no microphone in here.
Oh, and there's no microphone, so just speak up, and I think the room carries well. All right, our first reader is Deja Gordon, and this is a poetry. She's going to read her poem. You can start making your way now. Her poem, the title of it is Harmony. This poem was chosen as one of the spotlights, and so we put it first also, just to highlight this. The fun fact bio that she gave us says she has a passion for reading and writing since childhood and an interest in psychology. Just to select a couple of things. The reason this Deja's poem was selected was because she gives life to the famous 4 elements in this ambitious poem, which is reaching out to try to really capture a lot. She's able to give each element its own personality, otherwise known as anthropomorphism, but we can use a word like that among literate people. But Deja really pulled this off, so the podium is yours.
Hello. Harmony by Deja Gordon. Of all the elements, she's the kindest, with her gentle touches and cooling breeze, how she ruffles hair and stirs up leaves. She's everywhere, of course. Nowhere on land is free of her. She breathes life into you and the world around her. She is both the first and last thing you will experience in life. She is air, your first taste of life. Following her elder sister is fire, all-encompassing, burning, and overwhelming fire. She is as bright as the sun and even more cruel. After all, she can reach you where the sun won't. Fire teaches us caution, to be wary of that which burns. She snuffs out foolhardy behaviors. She has no place for immaturity. She's loud and commands attention. She's fire and she's inescapable. He's water, her direct opposite. Calm when she is fierce, still as she rages, and heals as she burns. He teaches the importance of patience. He provides opportunities and home. He's the ocean and he's everywhere. He contains everything. She's statuesque, firm and unmoving. She's unwilling to change, nor does she care much for it. She is stagnation surrounded by constant movement. She stands firm against time, a constant. Unlike her siblings, she's not made for change. She's made to last. She's made to stand firm against the test of time as she's nature itself. She's home and mother to all. She is earth and she is both the youngest and oldest. Born first, and yet her stubbornness against change gives her a quality of youth.
Our next reader is Olivia Hicks. Ricks, sorry, my mistake. Olivia Ricks. The title of her short fiction work is Hushed. Olivia has a passion for writing, but she says Hushed is the first short story she wrote. Amazing. Olivia gives herself a difficult task in this story, portraying both the thoughts and the words of two characters, but one is deaf. She also seeks to blend romance and fantasy together, and she pulls it off, creating compelling characters with strong emotions in just a few pages, making us wonder what happened next. As Olivia describes her story, Hushed, it's about these two teenagers with their problems in a world where love is forbidden. Together they try to survive the unknown.
Hushed by Olivia Ricks. I live in a world where love is forbidden. My parents died because of it. 17 years ago, they ran away from society and went to live in the forest. They never understood why love was forbidden. That was until they ran away. They believed that their love could conquer anything, but not this monstrous spirit. Their love didn't stand a chance between the evil forest spirit. But by some miracle they had me, and for 5 years they raised me. They left me a guide to life, and out of everything on that paper, the most important thing was to never fall in love. In my entire life, the one thing the most important people in my life taught me was to never fall in love. I always wondered what life was like for the people in the society my parents ran away from. When I was younger, I had this tugging feeling that attracted me to Thymia. The people never seemed as lonely as me. Whenever I go hunting, I sometimes get close enough to see their lives, and it's miserable. Although they may be surrounded by each other, it's completely dull. There's no escaping this life, and I think I'm okay with that. This is the last time I'm coming this way. The last time yearning for something that isn't there. As I began to leave, I heard a strange crackling noise. "Who's there?" I shouted. "I know someone's out there. I felt your eyes on me the whole time. Come out now." I shouted again while holding my bow and arrow up. A tall brunette boy came out. His warm beige skin was covered with specks of dirt. Had he been following me this whole time? Who are you? And what do you want from me?" I stuttered. 5 seconds passed. Am I speaking to a brick wall? I asked, "Who are you?" He reached for his backpack slowly as I tightened my grip on my bow and arrow. A notepad? Why is he writing on a notepad? He slowly held the notepad up, and in big letters he wrote, "No, not a brick wall, just a deaf person." Her eyelashes fluttered. I could tell she had been caught by surprise. Not quite the reaction I was expecting from her. Others would have had a concerning look on their face, but I never thought I would find someone out here. The burning sun glazed on her warm brown skin. She released the tension from her body, and a swift wind blew through her curls, causing them to bounce like a fluffy spiral of clouds. She was breathtaking. "Can I come to you?" I wrote. She didn't say no, so I'll take that as a yes. "My name is Erison. Yours?" She takes the pen hesitantly. She writes fast, and she shoves it back in my hand. "Why should I tell you? There's a reason why you're still here, right? Plus, names have deep meanings, and I want to understand you deeper." She raised her bow and arrow as she took the pen and notepad. "Runa," she wrote. "What's the meaning behind it?" "It means secret love." I looked up, and her eyes met mine. Her doe-eyed lashes fluttered once again. "Look, I don't know what you're trying to do here, but just go back to where you came from," she muttered. "I don't know what you're saying, but I'm guessing you're telling me to leave." I write while inching closer to her. She shoved me away immediately. I grabbed her arm as she tried to walk away, and started writing as quickly as possible. "I'll come back to see you. That's a promise." He's been coming to talk to me for 3 weeks now. I don't know if he thinks this is a game or not, but this needs to end. Every time he looks me in my eyes, I have this weird feeling like a sinking pit. I hate it. My eyes started to flood with tears as he walked up to me, and without hesitation, he wrapped his warm hands around my face. "I'm scared," I whispered as I tried to hold my tears back, and though he couldn't say anything, I felt warmth in his smile. His sharp brows drew together and his dark brown eyes stared directly into my soul. He didn't have to say anything to me. His face said it all. I start shaking my head frantically. We can't be doing this. You know what could happen to us, I say shakingly. As the clouds darkened, a light rain began to fall. He grabbed my hand and we rushed to get to my cottage. He quickly grabbed a blanket and draped it over me. Took out his notebook and started writing. Are you okay? I nod my head while avoiding eye contact. You want to know something? He writes. The reason I ran away that day was because I got mad at my dad. He had told me that I was lucky to be deaf. This way he was sure that I would never find love, because I wouldn't be able to hear my lover. He said that this way I would never be a target for the evil spirit. That was my last straw until I met you. The day I saw you, I knew everything would change, and I'm ready to risk everything for you. Tears shone in his eyes as he looked at me. What are you saying right now? I uttered. You can't say things like that. You'll know what'll happen. I began to tremble. He reached for my hand, but I snatched away in a haste. I've seen my own parents die right in front of me, with my own eyes, just because they loved each other. The spirit comes quick and quiet and just swallows you up, leaving nothing of you, not even dust. I pause. We shouldn't even be near each other right now. I don't want to die. I don't want you to die. I wailed as tears started to roll down my cheeks. He brushed them with his thumb, wiping my tears, and he begins to write again. My name means to be brave, and for you, Runa, I will be brave. I'll protect you. You will survive, and we are going to get out of this together. I promise. You have to trust me, okay? I nod my head as he starts to write again. There's this place that everyone's been talking about back at home, a safe haven. It's rumored to be a place where you can love as much as you want and live freely. But you have to cross a wall to get there. I'm going to get you there, but we have to leave now. How do you know if this place is real? I questioned. I don't. We're just going to have to find out. He writes with a grin on his face. I take the pen and start to write. You're insane, I snicker. Only for you, my love. He writes. He leans into me as his lips braze my forehead. What is this feeling? I've never felt like this before. It's like a warm, fuzzy feeling. He feels so sincere. The wind began to roar outside, and the rain began to sound like falling bricks. We have to go now. We're running out of time. I'm not going to be able to talk to you from here on out. We are going to be running the whole time, so don't let go of my hand. Are you ready? Yes. He grabs his bag as we dash out of the raging storm, running into the mist and strong pinching wind. The grip of his hand tightened on mine. The dreadful clouds loomed above us. The roaring wind hit us with every step we took. All of a sudden, I heard a familiar sound hit my ears. It was like a screeching, horrifying sound. My legs, I can't move them. Harrison quickly lifts me, putting me on his back. His muscles harden and his speed increases. I tighten my arm around his neck and I bury my eyes in his shoulders. I'm not going to make it, I think to myself. He taps my legs slightly, pointing to the wall. He aggressively hooks me up to the gear eagerly. I can't do it, I shuddered. We're not going to make it. Before I could utter another word, he placed his hand on my heart, staring into my eyes. I immediately understood that he yearned for my trust. Taking the lead, I started climbing. The storm began to roar even fiercer. The trees started dancing and water droplets came down on me, feeling like 1,000 little crystals piercing my face. We're almost there. I looked down at him smiling. His warm smile glistened back on me, calming me amid all this horror. Then all of a sudden I heard a horrifying shrieking noise. My smile faltered as my heart dropped to my stomach. No, we're almost there. This can't be happening. Tears began to swell in my eyes. Harrison's hand seemingly grazed my sides, and using all of his strength, he threw me across the wall. Why? How could he do this to me? The shadowy black spirit charges at me. Its tentacle-like arms reach for me, and its claws pierce through the air as its white, sharp eyes fill with hatred. My vision began to blur, and the wind behind me silenced. Harrison is one of the people who taught me to never love. So now that you know my story, will you let me go? Please. As I scrutinized the room. After the incident, I woke up in a strange place. They've been keeping me here for a couple of months now. Why should we let you go? What makes you think we could trust you? What makes you think he's even still alive? They question. Because he promised me, I will find him and nothing's going to stop me.
The title of the poem is Lies or Love. Hannah is a yearbook editor. She likes helping her community and helping other people. In her words, every day is an adventure and an opportunity to learn. The reason this poem was selected was for its deep theme of love, hurt, and disillusionment. Hannah captures the pain of heartbreak in her poem, giving voice to a feeling that most people experience at some point in their lives. She makes us feel what she felt, which is what good poets do. With love comes the risk of getting one's heart battered. And I'll just quote a quote from Marc-Andre. Poetry is the sister of sorrow. Every person who suffers and weeps is a poet. Every tear is a verse, and every heart a poem. So Hannah Warren will read Lies or Love.
Lies or Love by Hannah Warren. Love is a lie. It is something I tell myself every year. It is the memory of you that makes my heart die, and yet I will never let myself shed a single tear. You hurt me, and I believe I'll never love another. I'll never move on, but here you go. Seeing the flowers you left on the ground makes my heart tether. It is true love that I will never know. Why should I forgive you for tonight? All the I love yous that never had any meaning. All you ever wanted to do was cause a fight. I have given up on pretending. You caused me to believe love is a lie, and it is your love that I resist. I don't want to feel the pain of love if it means my heart will die.
Jackson Davis wrote a short fiction. Did I mention Hannah Warren was a Spotlight reader also, Spotlight selection. Jackson Davis is a Spotlight selection. His short fiction, Forgiven. First of all, about him, you're a student athlete and like pineapple pizza. That's very important. I don't know why, but it's important. What'd you have for lunch? Pineapple pizza? No. But the reason Jackson's work was selected because he's created an impressive story with fully realized characters and compelling action. His story keeps moving. Forgiven touches on deep themes such as what is right, morality, the soul, or as he says, overcoming trials and challenges toward becoming a better person. In this story, a young warrior must finally embrace his lesson his father sought to teach him.
Let me go ahead and make it known. I only got 10 minutes to present this story, so I'm going to bring it, trim it down a little bit. So, Forgiven by Jackson Davis. During the times of war, people yearn for peace. But the price to gain lasting peace is an all-out war. So it was that time for seeking lasting peace. People from Noakes and the Voljiks fought out all-out war to claim the prize of land and ultimate power. Little did they know that ultimate power could corrupt even the purest of them. The Noak was a very powerful Viking tribe. The Noaks are known for their brute strength, physicality, stamina, and their lust for combat. The Noak started to train for combat at the age of 7. The Noak tribe always produces elite warriors. One Viking stood out the most. His name was Radan. Radan was unlike the other Noaks. Smart, calm, master of combat. But even though one day he was on the battlefield and his mind just changed. He didn't want war anymore. He wanted peace. So instantly he put his sword down and ran away. He went to a distant land and he had a kid named Lucius. Lucius was an energetic boy, very adventurous, loved to play with other kids, but often the other kids always said he was too rough. Lucius always knew why Radon. Radon always knew why Lucius was always so rough and tough. But he never wanted to go back to his roots and his past. One day, Radon had talked with Lucius. He told Lucius the truth on who he really was, on who he used to be. Lucius, being a kid, he ignored him. He didn't want no mind what saying on what his father was talking about. Later on, the king of the Notes came looking for his champion, Radon. Radon, surprised to see him, was in total shock. King Rama gave him a choice to either join his conquest, be recognized as a traitor, and be executed. Radon, knowing this would be a heartbreaking moment for his son and his family, he chose to continue to join King Rama. Even though King Rama's plan was to set up Radon to kill him anyway. He didn't want his son knowing they was going to war, so even though Lucius was being sneaky and heard the conversation, Lucius decided to sneak on the boat and come home anyway. Approaching enemy lines, all you heard was clashes of swords, bloodshed, war cries. To Lucius, this was a joke. This is all play. As Radon encountered the enemy leader, the leader was very strong, unlike any other soldier. When they fought, no basic soldier could keep up with them. As one final strike, Radon was killed in his son's face. Lucius didn't know what to feel. He didn't know to feel sadness. He didn't know what to feel anger. He was just confused. Angrily, he shouted he was going to kill his father. The leader laughed, knocked him out, and sent him to a prison. When he woke up, he was just angry. Angry at what he could have done better. Angry that he saw the enemy, the killer of his father. Just angry. Later on, the enemy took Lucius to an auction to be sold out as a slave. One particular bald guy had an eye for Lucius. His name was Yuji. Yuji kept eyeing him down. When the auction was on Lucius, Yuji had purchased him. Surprisingly, Yuji took Lucius to a temple. Lucius was very confused. Why a temple of all places? Because he thought he was supposed to be a slave. Lucius questioned Yuji, why am I here? What do you want with me? Why do you want me to be your slave? The truth was, Yuji didn't want none of that. Yuji saw a confused young man who decided he needed peace in his heart. Yuji decided to tell the man the name of his killer. His name was Freyr. Freyr was the leader of the enemy tribe. Having that, Yuji decided to teach him the way of God, Christianity. Lucius had no clue what Christianity was and what it was even about. Yuji explained to him that Christianity will set him free and will teach him the way of peace. As time went on, you just decided to keep teaching them what Christianity was. And Lucius got better and better at his teaching with the Word of God. As time grew on, he just decided to give Lucius his own Bible so he could study the Word of God and the Word of the Lord in peace. Every day doing over scriptures, 7 months, so Lucius could feel free of the revenge and hate. One simple day, Eugene and Lucius continued their walk. They came across prayer. Lucius felt no anger. He felt no resolve. He felt no hate. He kept walking. In that sudden moment, Lucius knew that he was free. And he understood that seeking revenge was not the way. And that's all we have. So we're going to
Thank you. Then that was understandably hard to do, to try to edit your work, because it was longer than that. So he bored it down for us, and that was a work of art. There's also a quote I'm reminded of when artists, writers have to cut something out of their own work. It's described as sacrificing your own child. You know, it's which part do you cut out after you've created the whole story? Then you got to go back and take something out. So well done. So Jaden Bill's not here. Okay. Did Amira Muhammad ever make it? No. Okay. The next poem is by Noah Campbell. Okay, there's Noah. A Walk in Silent Hill. Noah is motivated. I'm just summarizing the descriptions of Noah. He has a passion for music. He plays piano, bass, saxophone, and trombone. And also has interest in the outdoors, walking and, what was the other thing? Walking and?
Riding bikes.
Riding bikes in the outdoors. And do you play music outside too? Or is that just inside?
Sometimes.
Noah's poem was selected because it tells a familiar tale. A bad dream keeps getting worse before the dreamer finally wakes up. Noah creates powerful images in the dream so we can easily imagine that the dreamer won't simply snap out of it, but this dream will linger.
This is my poem, A Walk in Silent Hill. Dividends. Before me lies a broken reflection. The person beyond the mirror isn't me. The bright smile on their face. It was always a false sense of reality. I wave, but they never seem to wave back. Instead, they dash away to the door, leaving traces on my side of the floor. Today I followed it, stepping through the rippling glass, into the room in the mirrored outdoors, where you've seen me last. Dividends. As I walk down the hazy street, I am but a drifting leaf. Through misty veils, my shattered mind does roam. Each shadow whispers, secret, a thief, stealing what is left of my sanity, a silent catacomb. Like a ship lost at sea, I navigate the fog, haunted by specters of a figure I cannot evade. In this twisted maze, I am but a cog, in the machine of hatred, where metal clouds are made. Dividends. My thoughts, an uproaring storm raging within. A tempest of fear and longing, tearing me apart. I'm but a puppet in this macabre tin, dancing to the tune of loud sirens and dark art. Like a moth drawn to a flame, I was consumed by my fears. In the mirror reflection, I saw a fractured soul, haunted by memories, drowning in silent tears. In the streets of Silent Hill, I'm swallowed whole. And then I woke up.
Yes. Okay.
The next short fiction, The Man, Machine, and His Cat, by Hayden Williams. This is one of the spotlight readers. Hayden describes himself as a musician and a writer. The reason this story was selected, this is a clever story about a very distant but still recognizable future. Science fiction story that plays on our concepts of time and cause and effect. This is what's called a high concept story. It has a clear premise and a straightforward plot, which is part of why it succeeds. Hayden writes with heart and sensitivity and puts the reader into a very famous and well-known clock tower many centuries into the future. Hayden says he meant to, quote, call out how we value time in wasteful ways, end quote. So it's The Man, Machine, and His Cat.
So let me first say I'm not going to be able to read the whole story. I'm just going to summarize it, but I want to also explain some of the meaning behind it. When I look around at like us, people, I see that we don't value our time. Every day we can go without doing anything at all. We can sit in our bed the whole day. We don't value our time. We are put on this earth to spend that time, loving, caring, building, doing, and we don't. We don't. Half of us sit around doing meaningless acts, talking to people, entertaining relationships that don't mean anything, cutting people off that we shouldn't cut off, not caring. I've seen a lot of people in my life go that I didn't want them to go. Some of them I drove away. And I'm trying to change that now. And with this, I want to call that out. People will leave you. They will walk away. They won't stay. But that time you have with them is important. It's still time. It's time that you breathed, time that you saw. The story starts in the year 3019, way in the future. All the humans are dead. We are all extinct. Nuclear war took us out, and now a society made of robots has been built in our place. We start in London, right next to Big Ben. A small stray cat is being chased through the streets after stealing a bushel of food. A bushel of food that robots call the modern man's meat. Right? The cat sees it and is like, I'm starving. I haven't seen living creatures in forever. This is meat. I'm going to take it. She takes it and she runs. The robot chases after her, claiming how it's useless to her. She runs up into a clock tower, a very familiar one in the London skyline, Big Ben. She goes up and to the top, and she dumps out the bag of food. It's not food. It's nuts and bolts. The key thing for the robots to live, the bare necessity. Just the parts and pieces. There's no sustenance, there's no life. Defeated, she takes a nap. And when she wakes up, she's faced with a towering man, a robot. But unlike all the others who have steel faces and amber eyes that glow, he's human-like. He has a human face. It resembles a man. He cares for her. He talks to her and spends time with her and gives her food. A little jar that has a dead rat in it. Takes the rat out and gives it to her for her to eat. He grows very fond of the cat, treating it somewhat as a pet. He says he hasn't seen a living thing in years. I mean, it's been centuries. He knows that his wife, she left not too long ago to go get some groceries, and he's still waiting for her, although he doesn't know how long it's been since the clock broke down. And he points to the giant clock that is broken. All the bells are dismantled, the whole tower is taken apart, and it seems like he used it to build himself back up, make himself live eternally. He talks about how his life went by so quick and how his mother died before she could ever see him become this eternal living being. He names the cat after his mother. He names the cat Felina. After a long time lamenting to the cat about time and how he wonders where it went. He wonders why his wife isn't back yet. I mean, it couldn't have been that long. The cat somehow makes a suggestion to him. Fix the clock. He knows the clock isn't going to tell him what time it is. That's not how clocks work. It's not going to tell you what year it is, what day it is. Yet, he plays into it. He goes and he fixes the clock. As he's fixing it, he continues to talk about all the years he spent with his wife and his mother, the family he raised, how the government sold him Big Ben because they didn't care for it anymore. They wanted to build giant towers. They wanted to invest in the economy, and Big Ben wasn't doing that. It was just sitting there, ticking, 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 ticking away, time going by. After he fixes the clock, it starts up, but it's not normal. 10 days is 10 seconds. It's going around and around so quickly. He looks puzzled and he turns around to his new pet. And she's rotted away. She's dead. And the last thing he says before the story ends is, where'd all the time go? Has it really been that long? With this, I wanted to address how we don't value the moments we have with people and how we should. Because one day you will turn around, they won't be there, and you'll ask, where'd all the time go? How long has it really been?
Jaden Barnes has written a poem. The title is Petals. Jaden is passionate about music, writing, debating, and physical health. She's also in the school band, playing the tuba. Okay. The reason this poem was selected because it has a deep theme about, shall we call it, growing up or having to grow up, leaving childhood and innocence behind. This poem is a comment on the density of the. This poem is dense, meaning it's a lot that gets compacted into a fewer words. So that's what poetry does. And Jaden has done it in few words. So we'll listen to him read Petals.
Every flower loses petals. Every season changes time. Darkness creeps close. The cool wind surrounds me. And that's what makes every soaring petal mine. A once flowing child flies away into dust. Thoughts once fluorescent with shine, now stained dull with rust. Adolescence stripped away, flown away while the petals swayed. 1 petal, 2 petals, and 3 petals. Once colorful, now turned dark with gray. But I miss you, Hyacinth. I know you'll recover. Just know I never loved to see you suffer. Even though you're wounded, I wish there was a way we forgive each other, because every petal flown away will reunite together.
And finally, we have another spotlight reader, Yesela Olgin. Wrote My Universe. Yesela is described by others as kind, compassionate, and brilliant. A perfect combination, which indeed it is. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote, "To the poetical mind, all things are poetical." This, My Universe uses the technique of having ordinary things take on new meanings. And in this way, it expresses the feeling of love or being in love. Yesela does a wonderful job of highlighting the little things and little moments that define younger love. From lip balm to walking side by side to the speechlessness that follows the first kiss, she paints an enchanting picture of that butterfly's feeling.
My Universe by Isabella Allman. Pink roses to make me blush. Gas stations fuel my collection of flush. Sand as white as snow, the ocean singing a mellow flow. As I lay with the universe in my palm, a scent so sweet, your watermelon lip balm. Ending the night off with the thought of you, loving every second from my point of view. Voices never high, arguments never exist. Laughter floods the room as memories go into the abyss. Speed walking the ground just to keep us close, picturing us together, a thought I love the most. Never ending talking, not a word missed. Poof, all my worries gone once I have been kissed. Find me when I'm lost, never let me go. Tied the knot in 10, or sooner you never know.
That concludes the student portion of the program. Concludes our program. The students, student readers, please see Miss Caroline Stevenson afterwards to get your. She's got something for you. And now, Dr. Ben Speller is going to give our closing remarks.
First of all, I would like to say to the planning committee, since I normally am not considered a creative scholar, I'm that historian that looks for the facts. But study of history focuses on the actual facts and so forth. And of course, in this country, because we started out at one point after we decided we were a democracy to include a caste system for a group of society, which automatically did away with the democratic process as we defined it in the Constitution. So I thought I would mention that because we started off with good ideas and then created the problem after we put our mission in place. So I'm saying that as a teacher. The theme of what we are doing now is called student engagement. Many of the professionals in a lot of fields that relate to this area feel that we should have and set a stage for more creative presentations like this, and also provide some guidance through mentorships. Now, what I'm going to do next is deal with what we had this morning. First of all, when you do creative writing of any kind, you are more concerned about presenting a story that could have possibly happened. But you still have to do it in such a way that is possible. We're not looking for, as we were reminded by one of our professors, we are not looking for historical accuracy, but we are looking for demonstrated creativity that was said that was possible. Now, how we did that today was to have some excellent professionals here who told their story and did it quite well to provide guidance for our students. And we really do appreciate that. We also really appreciate the fact that our English teacher who decided to do a book on, by the way, the young lady that he did it on, I called her a young lady because she was a young lady at that point, is my cousin. And we ended up having another program after he did his presentation originally that resulted in 200 people coming that were all relatives from all over the country to talk about how they were related to the author. And I told him today at lunch that I didn't invite him because we didn't want him to be in as part of that. Now, the reason why I'm taking the time to mention that is the fact that as African Americans, we do have the problem that we have either been left out of the history altogether, or it has been edited to meet what the predominant population thinks it should be in the context of their financial objectives. Slavery was done for financial reasons and that only. The situation that we had that resulted from that was that they had to come up with a justification for slavery. And this was one of the first times that race was used as the justification. And I'm going to be accurate about that. This is because of the fact that you may not see this, but the reason why they needed it because they had more slaves than they did white population, number one. Number two, they had a white population, which you very seldom see, that was out in the field with the slaves working too. And guess what would have happened if the less than rich white people who were out in the fields working and looking around and realizing that although their skin was white and they were with these black people and in the same economic conditions or worse. And if those two groups had gotten together, the plantation owners would have had a serious problem. So now that you know that, you can understand why we ended up with certain groups being almost in a state of disappearance. And we still have that being used in a political context now. So many of people who are in different professions believe that if we do not make sure that our future teachers and scholars and writers and so forth, in other words, the communication process that keeps us informed of who we are, why we are here, and what's coming next, we are going to have a very serious problem. So this is why we are focusing on this, and we are very pleased, once again, that the people this morning who told the story really did share in a very accurate way their own approaches to it. Most of the people who are very successful did not do it by themselves. They had mentors, they had people that shared with them the successes and so forth, and some of them were invisible. And I'll take it personally. I had a lot of support, both visible and invisible, from my European relatives and my African American relatives. Now I'm going to tell you about the African American relatives and so forth. They are much better at telling stories that support what you need than the European ones. Most cultures in Africa and other places use stories to tell history, as opposed to using the scientific method that we use. It's just as scientific because it's accurate, but they use the process and the methodology different. When I came along and were told stories, I had to repeat it back to the storyteller exactly the way it was told, because it was history. And I'm taking the time to say that so that everybody in here can understand that we had two approaches in this country going on to the presentation of history. And I did not want us to leave here without us understanding that, because sometimes the African Americans and the Europeans, when they get and start discussing history, are not talking about the same thing. I want to end by saying, as an announcement, we are seeking to have the next program in Edenton, North Carolina, and hope that we can focus on historical fiction. And we will be calling that collaborative student engagement because of the fact that the students will go through a process with a selected mentor, whatever we decide to call it. And then we will end with the student demonstrating their competence, or whatever we decide to call it, by doing what we had here at the end. In other words, this is being done as an announcement today for a more structured process next year. And thank you all very much for being here, and we hope that you all will continue to share in this experience and come our next leaders and mentors 20 years from now. Put your hand up.